Another area where I disagree with some of the things that the current commissioner's been doing is in taxing and spending. This chart that you have right here, I'd like to kind of explain a little bit about this chart. The top graph right there is the total taxable value of property in San Juan County.
Now that's the upper line.
Well, let's just talk about the top chart itself. Now, the upper line. This is from 1994 to 2011, so for the last 18 years. This is the total taxable value of all of San Juan County. The bottom line, that green line, is your local assessed. That's your real estate, your homes, your gardens, your store, whatever. That is assessed by the county assessor. The middle line, what color is that? Pink? That's state assessed. Sometimes it's referred to as centrally assessed property. That's assessed by the State Tax Commission. That's your oil, your gas, your mining, your drilling, those kinds of industries. It's based on their production. It's called the extraction industry because they're pulling things out and extracting it. You can see that the state assessed property has a lot more fluctuations, you know, up and down, simply because it is based on market and their production. So that's understandable. You can also see that there's higher value there. The bulk of the tax revenues in San Juan County comes from the state assessed property. So this access to these industries is very important because it is the bulk of our economy, bulk of our businesses in San Juan County. If all we had to live on was the 8% of the land that's private, that's that local assessed property, you can see you wouldn't be grading very many roads.
You don't have a hospital.
You wouldn't have a hospital. So whether you agree or not with the values that your property is, for the last 18 years, these are the values that the county has been collecting their revenues on for the property taxes. Now, during our current commissioner's time in office, and he came in office in 2005, you can see that the taxable value has sharply increased. From 2005 to 2011, when you add those two together, you can see that top line, and it just takes up a sharp increase up. Most of that is...
Gail, explain. This is the value of the assets in the county that the county is able to get property tax from.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so you can see that value has increased. Most of this comes from state assessed. You can see that. But you can also see from the lower line that your local assessed property has been on a little steady climb too. So when you add the two together, then you see that sharp increase in the taxable value of the county. The total taxable value in 2005, when he took office, was $442 million. In 2011, it was $944.6 million. That's an increase of 113%. So it's more than double just in those last 6 years. And it's even higher than that now for the 2012. They just finished closing the assessed rolls just a few weeks ago. The lower graph, the bottom graph on the bottom part of your paper, is money. These are the county reserves. Now, how the county gets reserves is kind of like if you get your monthly paycheck or whatever, and you pay all your bills. If you have money left over, you know, if you tuck that away and don't spend it in a savings account, that's your reserve. So when the county spends less in a year than they bring in, then they'll have some reserve. Over the years, prior to 2003, if you can look on that chart, the county commissioners, I think, were very responsible and very wise in handling the money, and they lived on less than they brought in or on what they brought in. They didn't dip into the reserves, and they let that interest build that reserve up. So they didn't spend the interest. They could have spent the interest and even dipped into the reserves, but they chose not to, and they let that build up. And they called it, this was Bill Redd and Ty Lewis and Mark Maryboy, they called it their rainy day fund because they knew the state assessed property does go like this. It's kind of a boom-bust kind of cycles. And so they would have money in the reserves for when the bottom dropped out of your state assessed property, they could still continue services and you wouldn't even feel a bump in the road, really, because they would have that money saved up. Of course, they had better interest rates than we've had in the last couple of years, but their values, as you can see, were also lower as well. I think this was a great asset that was inherited by the commissioners who followed them from 2003 on. But if you look from 2003 to now, the taxable value is trending down.
The value of this fund.
The value, the money in that fund, your cash reserves in the county has been trending down, which means it's been spent. I'll just read the text on the graph, and if you have some questions there. On the top graph, it says, during the years 2005 to 2011, the taxable value of the county increased $501 million. That's a 113% increase. Since the county's held to a high tax rate, it has in essence been raising taxes, the money that you have to pay, and spending down the cash at the same time. Because they have a tax rate, and they multiply it against your value, and that's the money they bring in. When your value raises, if they want to bring the same amount of money in, they could drop that tax rate and have it what we call revenue neutral. But they've kept the tax rate high, and they've let these values come higher, and so they get what the Taxpayers Association calls a windfall. And they've been spending that, plus they've been spending into the reserves. So they're living on a lot more than what they're bringing in every year. I don't think that the county can continue that kind of a thing, yes.
Do we know what they're spending it on? Because like a new hospital, that is not something that maybe they planned in the past, and it would be a big chunk of an expense that was needed.
But they didn't build a new hospital.
They didn't build that out there?
That's Grand County.
Because I'm saying, in order to make a good decision on whether or not they've spent wisely, is to look at, I would be interested in knowing what they've spent it on.
Well, I've been able to track down some of the things they've spent it on, but only some of the things.
Right.
But the health district handles the hospital, and the county doesn't.
The county didn't provide any of that. So that's what I'm curious is to know what they've spent all that money on. Because if they've kept the tax rates the same and they've dipped into the reserve,
yeah, and I would
where's
too.
it all going?
Monty would too. Monty goes to commission meeting every Monday. He would like to know too. We have been able to track down 3 big things that they've spent money on that I think were unwise purchases and the use of the money. But anyway, on the bottom chart, for the number 1 is Commissioner Adams took office in January of 2005, and the funds remained stable in 2006 and 2007. He became chairman in January of 2007. The funds declined $5.5 million over these last 4 years from 2008 to 2011. And they declined that way. I don't, it's a tax expense philosophy that I don't agree with. The cash reserves topped out in October of 2003 at $43.33 million. It bottomed out in October of 2009 at $31 million. That's 6 years. In those 6 years, the reserves dropped $11.6 million. It's come back up a little since then. From 2005 to 2011, it dropped $7.6 million. And it's at the end of 2011, it was at $35 million. I believe it's at about $37 million now. It was towards the end of March. That's about where it was 12 years ago. Like I said before, I personally like our current commissioner. I don't have, and I don't want to be negative, but I just want you to see the contrast in what he's obviously feels good about and supports. And he has defended this spending by saying that it's because of low interest rates. And he has made this statement that the county is losing $2.8 million a year in interest revenue. Now, I think that's an incorrect statement. Lower interest rates will not lower your principal. It will not lower your reserves. It will lower the amount of interest that you're able to earn. But if you put $1,000 in your savings account and you don't earn any money on it, you still have your $1,000 unless you take it out and spend it. So we're not losing $2.8 million a year in interest. We're just not earning as much interest as they used to do several years ago. But the cash reserves are not losing $2.8 million a year. In fact, from 1994 to 2010, there were only 2 times the interest even hit $2 million. It never has earned $2.8 million. It has averaged $1.3 million from 1994 to 2010. And it didn't have the big hit until 2009. So it was earning over $1.3 million every year up through 2008. And then about 3 years ago is when it took the big hit. And it's earning just like $150,000 to $175,000 a year from what it was before. So that's not the reason for the downtrend in the cash reserves. So we're taking a double whammy because of the low interest rates, but where the cash reserves have been dropped and they're spending them, you're not able to earn what you could earn. He will also say that the county has spent a lot of money on road materials for culverts, gravel, cattle guards, those kinds of things to do. That's what San Juan County has always done. That is not a new thing for road departments statewide to do that. And the state road department, you'll see there's stockpiles of stuff all over. It doesn't take long to have $1 million worth of equipment and road materials, stockpiled. That's not the reason for the downtrend. This will answer some of what Bonnie was referring to as well. This is the same chart here you have on your bottom chart of the cash reserves. This top line here is the total of all of the funds of the county right here. This red line right here, this is the B Road Fund. If you take all these little lines here and add them together, this is what you get. These are the different funds. This is the B Road Fund right here. It is a dedicated fund. It can only be used on the roads. This is where they buy the guards, the culverts, the gravel, the equipment. You can see the little ups and downs, and when there's a big thing like that, that's probably where they bought a bunch of gravel or culverts and took advantage of steel prices or whatever. But you can also see that it's fairly stable. It's not trending down. If you look at these lower ones right here, this would be your library fund, emergency services, the tort liability, the landfill, those kinds of things. They're dedicated funds as well. They can only be used for those specific purposes. And they're steady or growing just a little bit. But take a look at this blue one. This is the one you're interested in, Monty. This blue one right here, you see about 2003, it mirrors just about what's happening here. This is your general fund. That's where the discretionary spending comes in. And that's where the money's being spent, is in the general fund, not in the dedicated funds. We'll track down some major expenditures that I think have been an inappropriate use of county money. If you turn the graph over, there's this letter. I published this letter in April in the San Juan Record and in the Blue Mountain Panorama in Blanding. It created a little stir with a few people, but that's okay. A lot of people didn't know this is what had happened. But in May of 2007, the county commissioners pledged, to Janet Ross. She's the founder and the executive director of the Four Corners School of Outdoor Education. She's also one of the founders of Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance. But they pledged to her and her school $500,000 of county money to build the Canyon Country Discovery Center. If you go into Monticello, just the north end of Monticello, just before you drop down by Young's Machine, you'll see this great big rock sign for the Canyon Country Discovery Center. That is a private entity. That's a private school. I think she has every right to pursue her private business, but not with county money. Also, in 2007, the county purchased 30 acres of agricultural land just north of the fairgrounds in Monticello for $344,000. That's $11,467 per acre, about 2 to 3 times its value. What they call the San Juan County Event Center. They wanted to build an indoor arena, a conference center, convention room, or whatever, and a new senior center. In 2009, the feasibility study was completed. It came back and it indicated that the project would not pay for itself, and it would in fact cost the county $70,000 to $80,000 a year to do that. A third area where I've been able, this is a big one, is in December 17th, 2007, the commissioner signed a contract with a design-build firm to expand the current county jail to house more state prisoners. What they did is after they signed the contract, well, they never did do a feasibility study on this, but after they had signed the contract, then they learned that the state would not commit to them the 200 to 250 state prisoners that would be required to house in order for that project to pay for itself. So, but the county had already signed the contract. They were obligated to go ahead and pay for the initial stages of that, for the plans, and some of the beginning work. And they paid $1.8 million to a project that's just plans that are sitting in the vault of the sheriff's office. Rick Eldridge says they're golden plates.